Do you do Smoke on the Water a cappella every time?
No, I usually just do. Yeah, usually just come right into it. Need some intro music though. StreamYard just added the feature where you can do an intro video and outro video. So, all right, we are live. Welcome back to the After Action Project, episode 113. Tonight we are joined by Morgan of Morgan Beatty. I didn't even ask.
Morgan Beatty. Correct. You
Beatty.
Actually got it right. Beatty, like Warren Beatty. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Welcome back to the After Action Project. Tonight's episode 113. We are joined by Morgan Beatty of Morgan Beatty Knives, and we'll be discussing all things knife making and his Intro to Knife Making course. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. After Action Project is brought to you in part by the following sponsors and supporters. To join this group of folks helping out the show, send an email to jeremy@afteractionproject.com. We are sponsored by the Range Buddy app and Locked In Grip. Have you ever lost that perfect grip after shooting multiple rounds or had your sweaty grip diminish the ability to hang on to your firearm in different weather conditions? Locked In Grip is a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of shooting your firearm. Locked In Grip liquid shooting sports chalk is made for shooters by shooters. Visit lockedingrip.com. That's lockedingrip.com to purchase your liquid shooting sports chalk. Now, it is one of the, in the pre-show we were talking about, the drill dice, and I was explaining, man, I got too much stuff in my range bag as it is to add anything else to it. The cool thing about Locked In Grip is you can get it in a nice carabiner size or a nice bottle size with a carabiner clip on there. Clip it to my one of the handles and good to go. Don't need to forget about it. I don't have to take it off to put a little dab on my hand, rub it in, and then get to shooting. It does help out here with me in the dry heat that we have. Helps keep my hands nice and free of that moisture. It's noticeable how I milk the grip less when I'm using the Locked In grip compared to when I don't. If I forget to apply it, I find myself kind of milking and not like just kind of changing my grip, and my hands are constantly kind of fidgeting around on one another. So, and that's usually about the point that I remember I need to put some Locked In grip on my hands and take care of that in short order. Our other show sponsor is the Range Buddy app, a collection of over 160 handgun shooting drills, sorted by the required target type and filterable by the skills worked. One of the cool features about that is there's the surprise me feature. So you choose the target or the skills that you want to work on, and it will randomly choose a drill for you. That's available on iTunes and Android, available for Apple and Android. So visit rangebuddy.app or your local app store to download that and to check it out. So let's get into tonight's episode. Morgan, talk to us a little bit about Morgan Beatty Knives, what got you into knife making, and all that good stuff.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. First and foremost, thanks. When I started making knives, this is right around pandemic time, 2019, 2020, 2021. I was actually working music festivals for a living, traveling around as pretty much a graphic designer, setting up stuff, and from big banners to huge stickers, all that kind of stuff, wayfinding. And I traveled all around the country until all that stuff happened. And within 2 weeks, I was out of job and just bought a house, literally, like 2 weeks before we all got shut down, and had some serious time on my hands and a pretty good amount of tools because my dad kind of dabbled with it a little bit. So I had a grinder and a few different implements. Been kind of messing around with like making kit knives for a little bit by then. And then I had the time and I leaned into it really, really hard. And from pretty much day one, I was full time, and it was pretty much, July of 2019. And here we are at 2024, and I'm probably about 600 or 700 knives deep. That's how many I've made, all handmade, everything from start to scratch. Quite a bit of trial and error process, and lots of help from lots of friends and people across the internet and all that kind of stuff. But I was really lucky that people wanted to spend money on me learning, and that's like kind of what kept me doing it. So it's pretty neat. I think currently as it's going, there's a lot of people who are having a hard time with it. I'm, sitting in a position to where I needed to go back to have another little bit of income, but I'm kind of excited because it's making me feel a little bit more uh, like this is more something special for me instead of just a job now. And I'm really excited about that.
So are you all self-taught?
For the most part, I would like to say self-taught. I would say I've gone out and found all that information, but all the information has come from super talented people. To say I am not taught by other people would be a gross misnomer to everything. Like all the information and all the advice that people have given me over the years. I have never gone to a knife making class. I have never gone and say had a mentor or anything like that. But there are dudes out there that I have not even met just because this community is so tight knit, but we're all just across the country, right? There are guys that I have asked things that like I would not know what to do and figure out just maybe a little bit of trial and error with what they tell me as much as they could relate it. And that's kind of how it's gotten here. Forums are amazing in the knife community. It is crazy. If you want to learn something about something, you can type it in on Google and find something on Blade forums that will blow your mind the amount of information that people are willing to share, which not in all industries is that a very common thing. There are a lot of gatekeepers, but I've been really lucky that the things that I've learned how to do have been kind of given to me freely, and I think a lot of the thing is like showing where that information came from is a really big like hats off to some of the people that gave it. So, I would like to shout out everyone that has given me little nuggets over the years. And if I haven't, I definitely do my best to try to share that where I got that stuff from, because it's not all me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to actually get to that. The gun industry for us can be really, really beneficial. And then the gun industry can kind of be cutthroat a little bit too. If you the deeper you get into the gun industry, I almost feel like sometimes the worse it gets. And myself and Jeremy, I'll speak for myself, kind of taking a little step back from it. But I was going to ask you that question of what the knife industry looks like. Is everybody pretty willing to share and give you that ability of like, all tides raise the ships? Or
You would be surprised. So there's certain things that we're all good at that we don't have to tell everyone that we know how to do it, right? So are there certain things that are, I'm not going to call them trade secrets, but they are our sauce, our flavors. You know what I mean? And there's certain fingerprints, there's certain artistic DNA that's imprinted onto certain things that you're almost not going to go ask someone about how they do that because it's so much them, you know? But there is a lot of stuff out there that is so willing to be shared with because we don't want to see everyone struggling so bad. Okay, this is an old timer generation thing where this has come from. Oh, you just got to try it. You just got to screw up a whole bunch of times. Well, that's really wasteful in a time like that we live in right now. So, if you're especially telling a kid like, oh, just go get a bunch of exotic steel, start cutting them out, wasting a whole bunch of time, that doesn't do anything. It's teaching kids bad habits. It's teaching people bad things. So it is really good when people share this information. And if they came up with a really tried and true process and they're willing to share that, it speaks volumes about the industry, but it's because you want to proliferate what you're doing, but it's also a really good way to weed out the people that don't need to be there as well. Because if people aren't willing to listen to the small little nuggets and the small little pieces of information, they're kind of the ones that fall off, but it is all the people that really respect where they get all this information that seem to do something with it after a while.
Who are some of your big kind of role model knife makers that are out there? What are your kind of like, man, these are the dudes?
It's so varied. I mean, from kitchen knives to Japanese makers, guys here in the States. I think it's cool because there's so many styles. Like I have always really liked really classic stuff. So whether it's cars, I grew up with my dad's always liked antiques and old Americana type stuff. So there's knives like that, like Bob Loveless stuff that I would love to own a Bob Loveless knife. One day they're like investment grade knives, and he was kind of considered the greatest modern American knife maker, but then there's guys out of like my buddy Adrian. He actually is a kid from the Navajo reservation that awesome. Like, he works his ass off. He's really into MMA, and he's taught a bunch of kids how to grapple and do all that stuff. And then he picked up knives kind of the same time I did. He just recently became Neil Kamamura's apprentice, or not apprentice, but like pretty much like his assistant out in Hawaii. And if you know who Neil Kamamura is, he's pretty much what made Forged in Fire like a fun show to watch. He wasn't one of the judges, but he was a contestant, the guy from Hawaii that super long hair, makes badass big kitchen knives, and he's Japanese descent, but he was like kind of the rock star face of knife making. My buddy Adrian just was really fortunate taking classes, like going out to learn stuff from people, right? He happened to go to a class with Neil Kamamura. Next thing you know, he's got a full-time job living in Hawaii, making knives with one of the greatest knife makers ever. So there's guys like that. And then there's some of my friends out there that these guys, you'll never even hear about them, and they're better than everyone else. It's because they just like making knives. But it would be really hard to list off all those folks, but I would definitely say that everyone in my kind of general circle, we would all say the same thing about everyone else too, just because we kind of all came up at the same time.
What's the hardest part of making a knife, man? It's something that a buddy of I got a couple buddies, you and a buddy of ours, Jared, and I think Rick was actually on Forged in Fire, if I remember correctly, Andy. So I've known a few people that have done it. It's something that's always kind of piqued my interest, but it's one of those things where, for me, getting to the hardening phase, I'm like, man, there's no way I'm going to know how to do that. So, in your opinion, what's the hardest part? How difficult is knife making?
So the hardest part is acquiring all the tools that make it easy, which are thousands and thousands of dollars. And the hardest part is acquiring enough time to learn how to do all these things proficiently. But really, when it comes down to it, is filtering through all the bad information to get to the good stuff is going to be kind of like what it has to take, because there are so many, like you brought up hardening. So there's all the recommended heat treats from the manufacturer. So they're like, run it at this time for this temperature with this process, quench it in this oil. Those are your baselines, right? But then there's guys that go out there and like, all right, well, if you modify these times and temperatures, you get these things. So now you're starting to get into a realm where it's a little abstract. So defining like where it's like, this is the correct information and this is the stuff that I can kind of run with once I know what I'm doing. That was hard for me. And being patient, like seeing all these things that you think you could do, you're like, oh, I could definitely do that. And then you're like, I cannot do that. It takes so much screwing something up and being humble about it to just be like, all right, that it just takes time. And that is probably the single hardest thing about making knives, is generating enough time to be able to be in the shop to do some of the processes, because it takes 2 hours just to like get your kiln ready to go to heat a knife. Then it takes 4 hours just to temper the knife after that. Then you got to talk about glue times are about a whole day. Finishes take all this thing. So it's like time is like your biggest enemy, but also probably just the hardest thing that we don't have the luxury of. That would be probably my single most answer is time. It's really, really hard to just find the time to do it all.
That makes sense. It's like me and reloading, right? It's I had everything. I had all the equipment for reloading. I just didn't have the time piece of it. And thankfully, I have a good buddy of mine, Andy, who helps me out with the reloading and stuff. But it's that, and I don't know if I trust myself, right? Because then I'm the type, like, once I get proficient with something, I feel like, all right, let's start experimenting. Let's start really testing some stuff out and seeing how I can and dial it in. And it fascinates me, in the reloading world, what competitive shooters are able to do. So it's interesting to hear that happens in the knife. It's not surprising, but it is interesting to hear that happens in the knife making community, because it's, if we harden it at a higher temperature for a different amount of time, what does that do to the steel? and then it's there's so many different. I feel like there are so many different skill sets involved in knife making, right? It's design, right? Because nobody wants an ugly knife.
Mhm.
If it's not something that looks sexy or tactical, people aren't going to want to carry it or buy it. And then it's putting an edge on the thing, and I can't sharpen a knife to save my freaking life.
Well, thank God for companies like Wicked Edge. It's crazy. Like they're another amazing New Mexico company. Shout out Wicked Edge out of Santa Fe makes hands down the nicest knife sharpeners that exist. They're so cool. But a side note, yes, it is nuts. Like the things that the little things that you have to know how to do. Like by no means, I'm not a blacksmith. I'm not a machinist. I'm not a carpenter, yet I have to know how to do pretty much all those little things in there. I have to know how certain materials work with other stuff. Like you almost have to be like a small parts machinist, a process engineer, like all these things. But in all reality, it comes down to like this weird homebrewed talent that is just a caveman skill with a lot fancier materials nowadays. You know what I mean? It's no longer a rock, it's magna cut and carbon fiber and, high-end stabilized woods and stuff. So, but in all reality, it's kind of one of our oldest trades because, we had to sharpen something to protect ourselves at a certain point. So,
Yeah, I mean, anybody can make a knife, right? You can take a piece of metal and stick with me first on that. So anybody could take a piece of metal. Anybody
They
could
do it
create
in prison.
edge. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Well,
some
this
shivs
is kind of my point. Like,
yeah.
I could make a knife, right? But just kind of wrapping up to what you're saying right now, I could make a knife, but I can wrap some string around it and make a handle. How long is that going to last? Or the first time I really cut into something and then the string breaks and then I slice my hand open. And so, it's pretty intricate. And, it impresses me just to be able to look at everything. And then you start getting fancy and adding colors and adding, like my cool knife that I got from Morgan, Stingray of all things. I've never had Stingray before. That's cool.
Yeah, and that goes back to like, old Japanese stuff. Like they used it because it was bomb proof. And they saw that those creatures could swim through the ocean and get attacked by sharks and not get eaten up. They're like, oh, that's what I want, But it's interesting. Like I have to know like certain thing, like I know what kind of woods like will just absolutely ruin a belt or something like that, or like what steels at certain hardnesses like I can't even work on past a certain point, but again, it's all kind of trial and error. It's just you figuring out all these things that after a while you're like you kind of like start sticking with certain things. But going back to your like thing, like making a nice knife versus just making a knife, I have plenty of not so nice knives, and those are the ones that kind of live with me now, and they end up being testers. They're kind of the ones that I beat to death comparatively to all the fancy stuff, but knives are really funny because even though you're not going to need that functionality nowadays, like we really don't need them, like crazy exotic steels, because most of the time we're cutting open Amazon boxes and stuff like that. But the one time that you do want it, and if it doesn't work, you are going to be so mad and so pissed off that you spent all sorts of good hard-earned money on me. So that's like really where I think my integrity has held me up for a long time, because I don't want to give someone a bad experience, because I've had it and it's absolutely terrible. Like when you go spend like what you bust your ass for on something and it's like less than expected, it's terrible these days. It's like, it's the worst feeling. If I go to a restaurant and I don't get the food that I ordered, and I'm not a very happy customer, so I can only imagine spending $400 on a knife, and then you're like, oh, it doesn't cut an Amazon box. I should come sharpen your knife or figure out something how to tell you sorry in the correct way.
Yeah.
That's also a hard part about making knives.
Yeah, knives for me have been a love-hate, right? Because I've always just bought cheaper knives like the CRKTs. I love those knives because I can sharpen them because the metal is so soft, but then they don't hold an edge whatsoever. And if I lose it, it's like $40, $50. And now Morgan comes along and takes our concealed carry class, shows me his knife. So I get this cool knife now, and like I'm treating it like my baby, to where I'm like, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to drop it, but it's super, super hardy. and I've kind of been playing around with like what can I cut with it and stuff. It's like a new little kid
Yeah.
with a new toy, and so I've been really liking it. I'll just tell you guys a quick story. One of my buddies, he's well off. He's got a couple of bucks in the bank, and he's just gotten into hunting recently. So he went out to Cabela's or somewhere and bought like this array of like hunting processing knives that has everything you can think of in this knife kit, right? And he goes out with a guide, and they shoot and kill an oryx, and they bring it back home, and he's like, wait, let me go get my knife kit. So he comes and he lays out this big old knife kit, and the guide looks at him and he says, what are you gonna do with that? Cut us some fruit. And he reaches in, grabs his little hunting knife that's about 5 inches
Yep.
long, and he processes this whole oryx with one knife, one blade, complete edge the whole way. And I'm like, that is a knife. Now that's impressive.
Yeah. And truthfully, that's what makes the difference between like the stuff you go get at the store and then like, okay, so all right, here's a perfect thing. A Nighthawk 1911 or a T-Sauce. Here's your CRKT or the nicest running gun you were ever going to put in your hands, or like a Cabot or something, you know what I mean? Not to say my knives are at like a Cabot level stuff, but yeah, like the guy that goes for his elk hunt that has spent 10K just to shoot an animal and to fill his freezer, if that knife does not do half that animal, I'm going to feel so ashamed that I just tried to spend or have him spend all this money on it, but like that's really the kind of stuff that I really do think defines like nice knives, and like your cheaper stuff from like the stuff that like my community is like trying to put out there, like we're pushing how well steel performs, the looks of it, everything, and like trying to push that functionality into a realm. But it also happens to be like a piece of jewelry to men. It's like you go buy a really nice watch or you go buy a nice pistol, like you want it to work as well as it looks. And if it doesn't, why the fuck are you carrying it? You know what I mean? Pardon my French, but that's really how it is. I don't want to spend my money on something that just looks cool anymore. Don't live in that time and age.
Yeah. So let me tell you my final little story, my personal story. So I get this knife from Morgan. I put it on my belt, in front of my body because I can't carry a gun at work. So I'm like, oh, I'll carry this thing. I can open some boxes and stuff, and I pull it out because every chance I get, I take my knife out. I got to be clear there because I said pull it out, and Jeremy
Yeah.
Got excited.
Yeah, he did. I saw his whole face like, what? So I take my knife out every time somebody walked in. Check out this knife, dude. Check out this knife. And then I'm sitting there in front of my computer and I look down and I'm like, there's a hole in my jeans. so just to give you an idea how sharp Morgan's knives are, I just holstering my knife. I don't know what the proper term would be.
Yeah,
but,
just putting her back in, that'll happen every once in a while.
Yeah, so
that's a good thing.
Patches. Yeah, so but yeah, you can tell us by your passion of like you want to be successful and create something that somebody wants and we long for. So my question to you is kind of tell me a little bit more about that knife thing, because I mentioned the CRKT because I like the knives, but the metal is soft. Is that indeed the kind of the way it is? Soft, cheaper metal, doesn't hold an edge. How does that work?
Not really. Okay, so here's the thing. I have a drawer full of knives right now that I just did my little process on, but there's 7 of them. All right, 7. When they're making a batch of knives at CRKT, whether it's in China or even like Spyderco's made in America, they are cutting out a 4x8 sheet on a water jet of just blades. So you can imagine a 4x8 sheet that takes up how many pocket knife blades? Like 100, 200, let's call it 300. They're cutting them all out at once. They're heat treating them all at once. They're throwing them on a machine that doesn't register if it's hot or not with your fingers. Like I don't use gloves when I'm grinding, so I can see if that steel's getting hot. If I feel it even remotely get hot, it dunks in the water. So here's the thing. You don't get a knife that has any, like it's all the same. It could be the same steel. It's the fact that you get processes where quality control departments are completely like, I don't have a QC department. I am the QC. If this knife right here does not get hardened and it doesn't test out for me right there, it doesn't go forward. They'll make thousands of knives that went forward. You know what I mean? So it's really just mass production. There are amazing pocket knives out there. I have one in my pocket right now. This one was made in Italy, and it's actually from a company named Giant Mouse that is a production company of two other dudes, Jesper Vox and so they're both some Danish knife makers. This is their production knife, and it's a super high-end knife, but it was only $200. But if they couldn't make anything cheaper than this, their folders that they make by hand are like $1,400-$1,500 starting. So
Wow.
not to say that this knife's any different. It's just this is the more production version. There's no hand work on it. This is all CNC. You know what I mean? Like my knives, there is not a single computer navigated process in any of it. I cut every piece of steel out on a bandsaw. I grind it on my grinder. It's that blue one right there. My bandsaw is right over there. My kiln's sitting right over there. So literally like everything in my garage, the only thing I don't do is engrave. And I have another spot here in town because they have a laser and they do it better than I would. That's why I take it there. So really, when you're talking about mass production knives, like something like this, they do the exact same thing, but it's going to be how long and how much you enjoy doing it. Plain and simple. When you pick up a custom knife, it feels like it was made for you because chances are it was. You know, I don't know, like your staccato, like that's not even a custom gun, but that's one of those ones where you constantly want to like play with that thing, don't you? Yeah,
All
exactly.
the time.
Yeah, I don't know what your version of that is, Jeremy, but it's like when you get those certain things and then it steps you up and then you really become like a supporter of the industry that you're in, once you start buying those really fancy things. It's pretty cool, I think it's all really just dependent on like how involved people want to get and how much money they have, but there's a lot of supporters of these communities that don't ever really buy anything. They're just stoked on the stuff, Sure, people like probably, like you probably never teach a class to someone, but they might be a subscriber to your app, or, maybe they've told every single person to go get their CCW through you guys versus that just because they might have known one person, So it's pretty cool to have those people in here because you keep getting to make nice stuff and selling nice stuff and using nice stuff because people are supporting it,
Yeah, it definitely is a passion, right? And it's cool to see that a passion project turned into something that was your primary income earner. And it's a challenge, right? It's not something that's easy. It's not something for the faint of heart. And it's the blue collar work, right? And we're talking about trades dying off. This is one of those things where hopefully it comes back full circle, right? I think the pendulum will eventually swing back. It's just kind of interesting that we're in this time where things are kind of shifting away from that blue collar work and getting your hands dirty and getting in there and learning a trade. How would you describe your style of knife making?
Oof, that one's tough. I've always been like I love Japanese influence on things. Not to say like I don't make Japanese knives, right? But I love Japanese influence on stuff. Like the one that I made for Andy, it's called the Oni, and it's like, these wrapped, it's a Tsukamaki style handle. So it's wrapped and it's a very Asian forward style. But I would always say like, this is something like ever since back in the day when I started making knives, it would be like if there was a samurai that got dropped off in pioneer days in America, that's the kind of knife that guy would have had. And I would have been the guy making it for him. But I have this huge love of like Blast of the Mohicans, like got me super into Daniel Winkler knives. And my dad actually has a pretty decent collection of those. So I love like old period correct, big pioneer knives. I love super flashy, giant, big fighter knives that are only ever going to be in a museum, but like really when it comes down to it, like the style of knives that I make are like stuff that I would tell you use the shit out of it, because if you're not using it, it's not the tool that it's intended for. But I would say very, very function forward. But in this modern day and age, we have the ability to make things look as pretty as we want to or as ugly. So I'm going to go ahead and say I like trying to make them as pretty as I like to as well. But very utilitarian. That's like all my stuff. I would always tell you use it. And if you didn't, I would feel it'd be a disservice to me making it. So but I really do like Japanese stuff a whole lot.
Is there any style of knife? What was that?
Go for it.
No, I was going to ask if there's any style of knife that you don't enjoy making, or that you won't enjoy making, or that you wouldn't make.
Oh yeah. Everyone wants everyone wants a karambit knife. And I say, so karambits are cool, but they're really hard to make, and to make them nice and correct. They're just like, you almost have to have a really specific setup for it. And the other thing is, I hate when someone comes to me and they send me a picture of a knife that is from another maker, and they're like, well, this guy didn't get back to me, or this guy wants to charge me this. Can you make me this knife? And I'm like, well, if you want me to copy this guy, you can go kick rocks, because I'm not going to do that. So I really hate when someone tries to get me to make something in someone else's style without me kind of being the one to advocate for that. But I'll end up making stuff, anything. I just made a couple really, really traditional hunter style knives, that are very American Bladesmith Society style. And that kind of stuff piques my interest at certain times. And then there's sometimes when I want to make these wrapped knives because they're fun and people love them, and people love Japanese looking stuff. And then sometimes I want to make kitchen knives and nothing but kitchen knives, and now being that I'm kind of jumping back into different employment, I can do that again, which is cool. I can just go make the knives I want to make now and sell them versus have to go search out those customers and those people. Which isn't a bad thing. It's kind of detracted. It's made it too much of a job for me when it's something that I'm good at it, and I would rather keep being good at it for it not being I don't want to necessarily make it my own source of income, because it does remove that special quality from it. I don't think I'm producing something that's unobtainium at that point. If I only make a few knives here and there throughout the year, they do make it more special and more valuable, because there are many of them, and I would really like to go that route a little bit more, the quality versus quantity fashion. So
yeah, I'm checking out your Instagram, and quite a few beautiful blades. Your kitchen knives are looking awesome. I'm a fan. The cleaver, not the full-size cleaver, but something between a mini cleaver and slightly larger version. For whatever reason, those have always piqued my interest, although I don't think there's any practical use for them.
You'd be so surprised. Rectangle knives are amazing in the kitchen. When you're talking a kit cutlery, right? Not just a little cleaver. Or you're talking
I'm talking a mini cleaver. I love the mini. I can see the utilitarian value in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But the mini cleavers, and I think they were. It's just something that always it catches my eye, but I'm how would I use that on a regular? What am I going to do with a little, 4-inch cleaver?
That's it. Well, I made some tiny ones. They're these micro cleavers. You can go on my Instagram and see them.
Yeah,
they were literally, and they had a little knuckle that you put your finger through, and it was awesome because it felt like a brass knuckle. But that kind of stuff, I found the guys that wanted to buy that were dudes that really liked kit. They would go out, and they were probably the dudes that had a cloud defense flashlight or something, or had some real fancy, all their gear was the gear, you know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing that, I got it's a fidget spinner for that. And truthfully, when the one I made for myself, I would just sit there and wang on, just literally spin it in my fingers constantly. But things like that, little worry stones and tokens and all that stuff, people like having something in their hand, and the fact that it can cut something really good also is maybe just a plus. But yeah, it's stuff doesn't have to be practical. That's the best part about what I do. I could go make fantasy swords if I want, and people would probably be pretty apt to buy them, but that's the beauty of it. You can make art, you can make something that's from a sci-fi movie, or you can make something that is purely business end. I just finished up, my girlfriend works at a Presbyterian. She can't carry her gun on property, and stuff. And I don't like her walking to her car at nighttime. So she's like, can you make me something that's real violent looking? And I was like, hell yeah. So my Oni, the one that Andy has, but I turned it upside down. So it's pretty much just a body part remover. And I'm happy to give that to her. She's the love of my life. She deserves something that scares the living shit out of people, So I make stuff
That's
like that
great.
too. Yeah, and it's going to be all blacked out, and it's pretty much meant for just making sure people don't do sketchy things. You know what I mean? So those, it's like practicality can be there, or practicality can be a $700 kitchen knife because you cook every single day. You know, it's the beauty of what I do, and I'm very stoked that people decide to give me their hard-earned money for some of those reasons. They don't have to at all.
I just shared and I sent a link to the private chat with with a cutlery set that you have on your Instagram. Yeah, absolutely amazing looking. Um, we have a question from Scott. He's an instructor with us. He was asking about the thought that you put into the balance point on your knives, and so go into that as far as you'd like. How did you figure that part out of it, and how
That was
important is
actually
it?
that was cool talking to Scott about that. I had no idea when we were doing the class that, that he's like the Canadian samurai up there too. So he really knows. Like, that guy actually does blade combat training, which is crazy. Like, that stuff terrifies me. He was talking about different balance points on knives, and I think what he really liked is the fact that I didn't have a whole lot of doodads or like big jutting out points. Being smooth is like, okay, so imagine a fully stippled up pistol, right, in your against your belly all day does not feel very good, right? If you're shooting it all day, it's probably good, but it's going to eat up your hands. So, like, if the thing that you use to impart harm on someone else is imparting harm on you, it's probably not built right. So, like, always my dad would be like, I made knives at my parents' house for a while, and my dad was my QC department. So I would go bring him up. All right, how'd you like this? And of course, him being an old man, well, I don't know, it feels all weird right here. And he'd like rub his fingers on little spots. And finally, I like started taking that, and like I would hand him stuff and he would not say anything for a while. And I finally realized that like I was making stuff that was like ergonomic and like comfy, and I wasn't putting all these weird knobs and jutting out pieces on it. Like, you can make a knife look very gas stationy the more you do that stuff. And there's lots of things you talk about, nice knives versus fancy knives. Well, there's a big difference. One looks like it you got sold to at a Love's truck stop, and the other one looks like your grandpa gave it to you. And I'd rather be on that one side. But I've always loved how knives feel in your hands because, for one, they're a really, really tactile experience. So if you're a maker and you can't make a knife feel right, you're not touching it enough, probably. Again, funny joke. But like, they're in your hand. So like, this thing has to like interface with you really well. And I've always kind of prided myself on like no hot spots, no weird feelings. And I think it's just because like I constantly like fidget with a knife. Like, I'm always trying to see if I like the way Kydex feels, or the way the wrap looks on a handle or something. Like, I have a really weird attention for detail for that stuff that I could probably have in the rest of my life. But I think it really does pay off with like what Scott was saying. Like, you feel these things, and it's like it's meant to be in your hands. You don't feel like you could take it out of there, but you feel like it's meant to be there without like any like, you don't want to force it, like you're saying, milking a grip on a gun to get there. Like, you don't want to like take out that knife and just be like, I don't know if I like it here, because chances are you already cut yourself at that point.
I'm just going through your years of Instagram photos, man. It is, man.
It's changed.
Yeah, it's cool to see. I'm a fan of the handmade kitchen sets. You know what I mean? I think that's something that it's one I didn't realize. I got a nicer kitchen knife set, a couple years ago. Nothing super high end or anything, but the nicer, one of the better kitchen knives that I've owned in a while. And so that's something that has always kind of caught my eye, and it's one of those things where it's. So I think that's something that I kind of long for, is a set of custom kitchen knives.
They're very cool.
Yeah.
There's something about, so if out of all the knives that I make, I would say, all right, these are the most expensive, and that there's a reason. this is just a blank right now. This is one I'm sending out to my sister because this is the most modern kitchen knife I made, and I'll show you guys in a minute the very first ones I made. And it's like looking at an axe and a surgical piece of equipment, you know. But like the kitchen knives are what people want to spend money on. They're also the things that like people will say, okay, it's, you know, $700-800. I cook every single day, 3 times a day. You know, like you don't need a really fancy knife to open an Amazon box, but if you take eating seriously and you are a foodie, the food that you prepare, you're probably going to use nice tools. You probably have nice pots and pans, and the way you're going to eat it is probably pretty nice. So it helps also seal the deal when, you know, things are like, they cut phenomenally. It is crazy when you use a properly made geometry kitchen knife. They shed food really well. They make sounds that make you want to eat. Like, it's a really funny thing. There's a couple things that I just do like tinkering that I'm like, oh, that's the one, you know, and it's mostly like that little bit of a sound and the balance that comes from it. I can almost feel that like it's going to be there, but I'll pick that kitchen knife up and go before it's even sharpened and cut potatoes with it. And then know that I'm like, oh, I actually need to thin it out again. And I'll go pull more material off or shorten it up a little bit. And you can make these tools that are like, this is an heirloom grade piece of material that like people will actually have memories with their family. Every single Thanksgiving, every single time they cut an apple or they tell their friend like, oh yeah, go cut an onion. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that does that. Well, that's why cutlery is so cool. You know, it's like it makes you feel like you have an Excalibur in your hand, you know? And if you want to talk stuff that gets really fancy and expensive, cutlery is an amazing market to be in. And there's people out there that are so good at it. I couldn't even touch them with a 10-foot pole on how well they make knives and like their processes. And when you want to talk about guys like knife makers that make really phenomenal knives, kitchen knife makers are the best knife makers, in my opinion, because they make super thin stuff, super precise, but they're also these really big knives. And they have a respect in a community of like their stuff is because it's so practical, but it's also so functionally beautiful. I think there's a different community behind it. Like there's a different look at kitchen knife makers than there are guys making tactical knives and hunting knives, because inherently there's kind of do harm on one side. And then this is like, oh, this is how you cut up beautiful florets into organic carrots. You know what I mean? There's a different market and different mentality behind it. But like kitchen knives are really, really like where, if you want to learn how to be a good knife maker, cutlery is like where you really need to cut your teeth, because it teaches you all about geometry, heat treat. And these are knives that get used 3-4 times a day. When you're talking, your other one literally sits there and you only use it when you're pissed and you want to cut a string or an Amazon box. And trust me, boxes from China aren't really all that hard to cut. So, you know, you don't need Magna Cut just to go rip through a bunch of Amazon packages. But
yeah, I'm looking at this. I can't stop looking at this. The 8-inch chef knife that you posted on my card on Monday. That handle on that is freaking sexy. How do you? Was it the greenish one? Sorry, I don't have the link on there.
No,
it's almost. You know, there's purple, red. There's some green and yellow in it.
Was that was probably the one with it almost looked like trout pattern.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a company called GL Hansen's, and they make this really wild micarta, like all bougie designer micarta, which is cool. But like it's cool. I get to find all these amazing material manufacturers out there, and that's a really cool thing about this industry. Almost every single thing is from a small little mom pop out of America in some small town. It's amazing. The steel all comes from Germany. That's like all the foundries that produce all of it. And that's okay, because they have the science behind it. But like all my materials, all my tools, all my stuff is made by hardworking people here in this country. And I love that, you know? So like a GL Hansen, like you're talking about that knife, That actually went to a lineman of all guys, because he just wanted to like make barbecue and have more fun cooking. And he ended up buying a lot more knives after that because he got the bug.
Yeah. How do you
And
choose
I love making kitchen knives for that. Oh, go on.
No, sorry to cut you off. And that's just
No.
I'm looking at I mean, you're talking about heirloom quality knives. There are some knives in here that that I can see being handed down to, son and grandson and just making it through the generations. I was looking at one that you made for somebody here in the land of enchantment with some turquoise in the handle. How do you choose your handle material? And is that something that is, you kind of wait to see if the knife has like a personality, if that makes sense, or without being too kind of hippie?
No, I mean, so when I first started, I was all about like let's find all the cool gems and all that weird stuff you could put in there. Pine cone, like I loved fancy handle work. And then I really started seeing like certain stuff would fail a lot. And so all these crazy colors and all this stuff would become a nuisance. And they also I don't know, like certain things detract from really quality materials, right? So then I found vintage micartas. And when I found out like the stories of why micarta kind of like what it is, it was a really cool material made by a really smart guy, and then phenolics. And you start looking at all these things that have history in them versus things that are just like manufactured. So then I started certain customers would come to me like, oh, I want like this, like you can run with it, right? And that would be like me, like, oh, cool, I'm going to make the knife I want to make. And then in turn, that's when I started kind of like sourcing out the certain materials that I found and like that I really like, is because people gave me the leeway to make what I wanted because they trusted me enough to kind of use my expertise or like whatever style that I believe would suit the knife. And that's how it worked, So then I would kind of give people like, I really think this would look good on here, blah, 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 and they're like, oh, that's cool. Can you get it in a different color? And that's kind of where certain things come from. But like, I went from using the craziest exotic stabilized woods all the way down to like, I love natural linen micarta more than any material on the planet because it's bomb proof and I know how to work it. And I know the outcome, and I know you're never going to get a cheap knife like a CRKT that has a piece of Westinghouse or like some micarta that like has history from like a factory that piece of material was pulled from. Because it used to be like all the panels and electrical circuits, all that stuff was put on micarta back in the day because it's non-conductive, it's fireproof, and it's just bulletproof. So you'll go into like old factories from, the 40s and 50s when Westinghouse was really popular, take their panel out, and it's like a 4x4 chunk of this stuff, and it's worth like $3,000-$4,000, but it has the history that it was like in part of manufacturing in American, the heyday of like when we made stuff. And I think that's really cool. Being able to find certain species of woods that are from here in New Mexico, like alligator juniper, like you're not going to find a lot of other knife makers making stuff with like alligator juniper. That's just like, that's a New Mexico thing, So I try to tie like where we're from also into it, but I don't want to make like, you'll understand this being New Mexicans, but I don't want to make a knife look like it's from Santa Fe ever. You know what I mean? Like black and turquoise is cool, but if you overdo it, it'll make a typecast real quick. Looks like it needs a ponytail and like a frilly dress, and yeah. But I get a kick out of stuff that like looks and feels good, but also like serviceable. Like if I give you something that you're gonna be scared to use, you're not gonna use the knife. So might as well use some stuff that like I'm pretty trusted in,
Yeah, there's and the knives that kind of stand out to me that have that almost, it's a subtle homage to New Mexico, right? There's a band of turquoise, or it's an accent piece.
Yeah,
and it's because everything in Santa Fe, for people that are in New Mexico, it feels touristy. And if you see somebody walking around with that, it's like you're posing. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
You bought a piece of tourist fool's gold is what it is.
Hey, Benny. Sorry, my
Talk
cat.
to us a little bit about talk to us a little bit about your intro to knife making class, man. That sounds like something, Andy and I have talked about doing, hosting AR building classes. And, there's a 1911 builders class that we want to get out to with AJ Zito. But knife making, man, talk to us a little bit about that. Who's it geared towards and all that good stuff?
Well, so because it is like an intro to knife making class, it's kind of like the very first steps you're going to take to get into that. So I've done a few classes and kind of testing out the idea more so because it's really hard to like understand who you're going to get as a student, right? You guys probably deal with this as a safety factor. You have to trust that that person giving you money to go learn something from you isn't going to kill you on accident. You know what I mean? So I do, it is very beginner. So that being said, the stuff that you build in the class is beginner. It's intro to knife making. I give you pretty much maybe say 4 or 5 shapes. Like we'll talk like a few months before you're going it so we can all schedule it in, right? You choose kind of the profile of the shape you want, right? And then you kind of choose the color. And then what I'll do is when that class shows up, I'll have the blank already cut out. So you don't have to send 20, 30 minutes sitting on my bandsaw, almost cutting your fingers off, like, because I know how to do that pretty well and I'm fast at it. So then you start with a blank, you get to profile it, you get to drill all the holes, you get to map out what type of pinholes you're going to have, the layout of the knife. Then you get to grind it, harden it. And then after that, we're going to set up your handles and get everything like your handle scales, what material you want to choose, whether it's stabilized wood, micarta, whatever, and all that. And we're going to lay it up on its liners so you get something a little more fancy than just slapping 2 pieces of wood onto the handle. So like first day would literally be profiling, drilling, pre-heat treat grinds and heat treat. And then heat treats take like 4 or 5 hours because you got to warm up the kiln. You got to actually harden the knife. And then there comes the temper cycle. So what I'll do is take those knives for, so you don't have to spend 4 hours staring at a toaster oven to temper them. I'll do that on my own time. You come back the next day and we start with a hardened blade. You grind it, you put what finish you want on it, and then we install handle scales with a little faster set glue than I usually use. And then profile, sand out everything, and then make a Kydex sheath, and then sharpen that knife. And literally within 2 days or a 12-hour period, you have a finished knife from start to finish. And so what it does is it teaches people what tools you're going to need to get involved with it, the techniques and the stuff that like you want to know to do so you don't hurt yourself. That's one of the biggest things for me. I don't want to ever hurt someone when they're trying to enjoy something. It's like, again, I don't want to impart harm on something because they're like trying to literally use this thing, right? So like my classes, like the very first one I did was for my 12-year-old nephew who is not very mechanically inclined. And he's like, he wasn't very confident when we started the class. And by the end of it, like it was crazy. It boosted his confidence around tools and machines so much because I think I gave him an enjoyable experience with it versus like all of us coming up with our old man going, well, if you don't do it right, you're going to cut your finger off or something. You know what I mean? And like, I didn't do that. And I think I was maybe a steward to the craft by just making it more enjoyable. And truthfully, all this is it's following certain little processes that if you just mind yourself and you listen to the instructor correctly, like what you guys do, you're going to do it right and you're going to have a good time, And so it's interesting because once I took your guys' course, the class that I did after it, I had to mind myself a lot to like not try to impart too much of like my like any bad experience I had on something. Like I didn't want to like let this father and son be like, oh, we're going to burn ourselves or cut our fingers off if we don't pay attention, And turned out the kid was 15 years old that did the class. He excelled so hard because he listened so well that I was like, man, I almost want to teach it just to like kids now because they're almost easier than like like grown up with like bad habits already. So I really do think I would like to teach it to more kids, mostly to get kids into the craft, and because I don't think there's really many ways for them to do that, and it's not something that I think they're gonna know that they like until they try it. And I really think the class is just really aimed at like maybe the person that wants to, maybe like a collector that wants to finally make a piece for themselves, or a person that just wants to like hold a piece for them, or just learn something that they've never thought they were going to learn, and by all means I could do more in-depth classes, but I think that would come after someone's already a qualified knife maker. And to that place, I don't really think that has any legitimacy as far as me making any money, because I just want to share that knowledge, right? But to go give someone a class for $250 where they get to take home that knife and they get to learn exactly how it happens, that's pretty valuable to me, because like, for one, a knife costs $250 if you're getting a custom knife anyway, so you might as well have some serious input on it and get to choose everything you want on it and be a part of it, and have an experience with it. It really like, it like humanizes that knife to you at that point. And again, to not sound hippie, but it gives you that knife now has memories and like energy attached to it that you wouldn't get from buying from a box store.
And it's that heirloom piece, right? Like it's one of those things where, fathers used to hand down their pocket knives to their kids, and the kids used to carry that pocket knife into adulthood. And you don't see that very much anymore. But I think part of that is it's one of those things where, I don't think folks we don't have it anymore where it's, my dad made this, right? This is something that he made and built with his hands. And how cool would it be to take a class, make your own knife, or a father and a son to make their own knives in that class and really have that experience to pass down. And it's one of those things where, like you said, it kind of gives it meaning and gives it life, and it makes it more than just a tool, right? It becomes invaluable at that piece or at that point. So, man, that's awesome. I'm like, man, I need to figure out when I can, set aside a couple days to come learn how to make a knife. And, right.
And too, if like, I know you have like so much going on with like, family and other stuff, that if you ever wanted to do it and we had to split up like 2 weekends or something, like we'll do it, because I also have a hard time getting stuff scheduled on it too. But like I really do find so much value in, like, I can make knives all day long, but truthfully, like the most value that I can add towards what I do, towards me making an income for this or stuff, is actually like educational products, right? Just like your guys' course, like you're literally giving someone, like you're not giving them something to hold other than, they still have to go do all the other stuff for that. But it's amazing that informational and educational product, how much it lends to like your brand or like what you do. And it also helps you not have to put all your eggs into the basket of just making stuff and like, ruin your hands just to do that, when you could have someone, like, if you could just eloquently tell someone like, oh, this is how you make a knife, they're stoked about it and they want to pay you money for it. And I'm very happy that people want to do that. Because it's a really cool experience. And I do think that it is a pretty unique one. We have a really awesome city councilor actually that was on Forged in Fire, Dan Lewis, and he teaches pretty awesome knife making classes. I actually made a tomahawk with Dan Lewis. I'll grab that.
That's cool.
He is one of the nicest guys ever. But yeah, we went over there and I was like, man, I want to make a tomahawk. And yeah, we forged that sucker up in a day and had a great time. That's the only time I've ever taken a class with somebody. But I even brought the idea up to Dan. I was like, how do you think it would be a teaching class? He's like, we're busy all the time. If you want to do it, you should, And so I'm just now trying to find like time to be able to teach courses and stuff. I'm sure you guys also have that struggle too. Hard to get enough time.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's freaking awesome. That might have to put it out to our alumni students and see if we can get a group of folks together to come down there and kind of take that class together as students. I know Andy would be in. I'm definitely in. That's it's because it's not something that I'm going to go out and invest, the thousands of dollars and then the years of time to kind of perfect it to the level that I would need to do to make the investment and all the tools worth it. But I think it would be cool to be able to do, a few times, right?
It's a toe wetter. That's what it is. It's a good thing. It'll tell you if you want to keep going or not. And then if you don't, you have a knife and you have some really cool memories. And if you want to go down the rabbit hole and spend all your money, then by all means, start becoming a knife maker. It's quite a bit of fun. If you like expensive hobbies, that's another one to add to the list. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. We'll just
think
use your
that's-
Yeah, you
tools.
guys both like it. Yeah, I know, right? You're like, it's all right. I already have enough going on.
yeah, if Andy would just invest staccato and bull armory money into knife making tools.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, it's funny it can go both ways. Okay. It's like I'm trying to be like, oh, I should probably buy all sorts of stuff for we're trying to figure out about renovating one of the other houses, my property. And then I'm just like, well, I gotta go look on the material website, and then I gotta go get new belts because see that belt wall? We're missing a whole bunch right there, and that's like a $300 check mark right there, just to make knives. So I was like, well, I guess I gotta go spend $400 this morning just on stuff. So, yep, belts that I'm gonna throw away in 2 weeks once they're done and gunked up. But
Dang.
again, I get to make cool things that people will have for the rest of their life, and they'll tell people that they got it from me. And I wouldn't have this conversation with you guys if I wasn't making knives. Even if I took that course, we would not be here if I didn't do what I do. I've developed a relationship with Andy now that's pretty cool. Yeah, mostly from taking his money for making knives. I'm all about that too. But but it
You'll be
is
making me another one here soon too.
I know, right? Yeah, got to do some coaching trade. It'll be good stuff. But back to like the knife classes, I think if we can definitely figure out. I think it'd be cool to do maybe get myself tooled up a little bit more so I could do more people at one time, because I can only really do about 4. I don't have much tooling to make it fast for everyone. But if we did that, then, it'd be super cool. And I think it'd be fun to do like, maybe incorporate a little bit of what I do with a little bit of what you guys do, and, maybe help each other out, promote during that. Because I know there's lots of folks that when I'm teaching classes, or even more kind of my direct community, that they're constantly looking for people that are teaching CCW courses or coaching or stuff like that. And it is hard to get it right now because everyone wants coaching. Everyone wants it done right then and there. And you guys really like knocked it out of the park with like how fast and how accommodating you were with everyone. And not to like jump on a tangent like your guys' course, but like I was blown away that, you guys had like 40 or 50 people through there that weekend.
Yeah, it was quite a few. I think
it was crazy.
Right around 39 or 40 or so.
That's nuts. And no one got shot. Everyone's good. Yeah. Thank God.
Number one goal, everybody leaves with the same amount of holes in them that they came with. And
yeah, there you go.
But this is Andy and I have been doing this together for a long freaking time now. And, we talk about it every few months, where there are times where it's me, Andy, and Scott, and there's a group of 3 or 4 students, 5 students in the class. And I'm like, I got to figure this part out because, Andy and Scott didn't sign up to not make money, and we're not making money on this weekend. And
I know, right?
And we've just been, it's the consistency piece. And I think we've done a pretty good job. We've done a really good job consistently providing value to our students. And, I spoke to somebody today that was calling about, taking a class with us in October and November, and he was asking about a discount. And I said, hey man, we don't, instead of offering discounts, we just, we charge what we charge, and we haven't raised our prices in 8 or 9 years now, when everybody else is, we used to be the on the upper end of average with our course cost, and now we're on like the low end of the average, and it's
it was totally not even competitive. Like you guys were, it was a hard bargain to not choose you guys. And then once I went through the course, all the questions that you guys answered before and after, the sheer amount of information that you guys are willing to give without having to be like, oh, well, should have just paid attention. Or like, I just text you. I was like, so how long does it take to get this going? And both you guys like, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. And I had a certain question about my questionnaire that I wasn't sure about. And you guys are like, yeah, just like, you made it so much easier and so much less intimidating than I thought it was going to be. And that was like, you got people that don't really want to have any confrontation going into those courses. I know. And they're going into them because they're they're in a position where they want to protect themselves. Well, you did not take advantage of those folks. You did them a very good service. And I think you came at them with a very humanistic approach in an industry full of a whole bunch of douchebags and a whole bunch of people that make you feel not very good about your choices, So you guys really did a good job. For God's sakes, you have a Canadian as an instructor. That's fantastic.
Man, Scott is more knowledgeable about most of this stuff, and it's. I remember the first couple of times that we taught together, sitting in the class during his classroom portion of it, and just like absorbing the wealth of knowledge that he was sharing, and and the way he relates it to the late, like the everyday person. It's pretty freaking cool to see. And I think if there's anything that I could say, hey, I did a pretty good job of, it's tricking Andy and Scott into working with me for all these years, because without them it would be a completely different story.
And that's all it ever is, man. It's people are a huge defining factor between like every business these days. And like where I want to put my money is where I want to put like also like kind of my emotions and my good feelings, And once I did that course, I left there feeling like a friend, not just a number. And I know that you guys still have to treat it like it is a business. It's not a friend making course. You could do all that for free. But man, it was amazing because I felt like I left there with more than what I came with. And again, I don't get that these days. No one does that. You feel like you literally got like taken advantage of in almost every situation in life nowadays. Thank you guys for not doing that. I'm quite stoked on that.
That's Andy, because when you were talking about we were getting back to you, I'm like, that must have been Andy, because I'm not very good at that getting back.
That was after the fact. Yeah. Andy was just kept hollering at me about if his knife was done or not. And then I accidentally called Scott Steve on my Instagram post talking about how stoked I was. And so then I heard the backlash on that. But yeah, it's cool because he's a professor. So the way he talks to people is that's what you need. You don't need G.I. Joe doing that to people. You need a person relating that information to people in that way, because if the shit ever hits the fan and we have to use these tools and these things that we went to you for, I do feel like I'm going to be in a better position because of your guys' attitudes towards it than if I took it from Class X or whatever down the line. I know there's other quality instructors out there, but it wasn't some NRA like commercial. It felt like, like all of it was so well related to us in a way that I think everyone felt really comfortable. And we were willing to sit through 8 hours in the middle of the desert in Albuquerque to get that going, But you guys did a quality job. And the few interactions I had, because I know you're really busy, like you set up a good range, you set up a very safe environment for everyone. And I'm genuinely worried about that kind of stuff because I have heard horror stories, but like the moment, like you had a command to you that was not. It wasn't intimidating. It was commanding. And that's a really important thing in what you do, because I didn't feel like you were trying to intimidate us or put it like you were just trying to make sure that we listened, because if we did, good things were going to happen. And it was good, and you guys, you shoot well, you teach well, and you guys run a good business and a really good course. And I think out of everything in this day and age, that's pretty cool, because you guys could just shit the bed if you want, and people still give you money. That's the sad part, but you didn't. And I commend you on that.
I appreciate it. The last, and when Andy, he tells the story in class, because he reached out, he took my class probably 11 years ago now. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, I'd like to be an instructor with you. And I said, cool, man, go get the credentials. This is what you're going to need to do. And then come back to me and, we'll chat then. And quite a few people have said that through the years. And he was the one dude that went out and did it. And, you know, in that conversation that I had with him, you know, we talked about finding a good training counselor, and he found a great training counselor for him. And then after that, you know, I was starting to, you know, in my mind, I was going to help Andy kind of set up his own shingle, hang his own shingle out there, you know, because that's typically what people will want to do. And I'm fine with that. You know, I've helped other instructors get going here in Albuquerque. And that's fine, you know, as long as they're going to be quality and reputable instructors. And thankfully, you know, he came into it with the mindset of he was going to learn and do the work and not just, you know, go the route that a lot of folks do. And that's just, I took a class, I'm going to go out there and start teaching because I know it all now. But one of the things I told him, I was like, hey, man, it's the easiest thing the easy part for us is getting great reviews from folks, right? Because for 98% of our students, it's going to be the first and only firearms course that they take. So they have no baseline understanding of what quality instruction looks like. So it's important that we live up to that belief that this is a great class and it was the best class for them to take, and that we got to do everything that we can to make those things true. You know, so I really do appreciate hearing you know, that feedback, because that is something that we try to do. And, you know, running a safe range is something that we pride ourselves on, because it's, you know, got 20 or 30 people out there with you walking around with guns, not walking around with guns, right? But, you know, in some ranges you are.
Yeah.
Right. It can be scary. And that's the last thing I want. You know, I think our first huge range session, we had 43 students on it, and this is pre-COVID. So we were able to run it a little bit differently, where we were able to have 40 students out there. It was Andy, myself, Scott, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 other of our assistant instructors helping our, you know, RSO and that kind of stuff. And I knew we had some students that were coming in for like their 4-year renewal piece, and some people that had taken firearms courses with other instructors, well-known instructors. And, you know, and I knew when they got there and they saw that, they were going to be like, they're going to be apprehensive about it. Right. So I made sure to poll them after the class, and a few of them were like, man, I was worried when I showed up and saw this many students, but you guys put that to rest fairly early on in the deal, and it was a great time. So that's what we're looking for. So, Andy, what do you got?
Man, I'm just sitting here listening, but yeah, Morgan, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, sorry about last week. I didn't have I just started another job, so I kind of pooped the bed on that one. But glad to be here.
Hey, but you're here, and that's all that matters. So where can we find you? We talked about Instagram.
That's probably the most contemporary way to look at like current things going on. My website, morganbeattyknives.com. That's Morgan and Beatty, Beatty, knives. And that's going to be the easiest way to get stuff. Also, join my mailer list that's on there. It's on the very first page. If I get your email, you're going to start getting emails from me, and they're not anything more than I try to give all the stuff that I do make people. I try to give people that are subscribed to my website first dibs and a little better deal, because that's really how I want it. Like the people that are signing up directly for my stuff, I would way rather give them the option to get it cheaper and at a better means than anywhere else on the internet. And then BMC Tactical here in Albuquerque, also great folks. They have a little collection of my knives. I did some of the same ones I did for Andy, the Oni models, like 3 different style ones that I did up there. And moving forward, since I am working again and not just doing knives full time, I am going to be doing drops pretty much every month or every 2 months. So whenever I do those, they will be through the newsletter and Instagram. And how that'll work will be first come, first serve on everything. That's just how it is. I don't like having people buy spots and stuff, because then it just gives me anxiety that I got to finish their stuff, blah, blah, it's crap. But if you guys are interested, the website has that information on it. And really the best way is going to be just going through the website. It gives me the biggest amount of control over getting in touch with you. And truthfully, I don't like being on social media anymore right now. It literally just pulls my soul clean out of my body, and I feel like I'm blankly looking into a screen. So I would way rather give people that are like directly involved in my stuff that attention in that email. It's awesome. Or if you go on my website and you just have questions about knives, please call me. I will answer the phone and I will directly talk to you because I got time. So, but courses and stuff, it has those on there. It divvies out all the price and everything. And if you do decide to hop on there and look at courses, message me first or do something so we can talk about timing and timelines before you go and pull the trigger. I don't want you to be waiting a couple months because I didn't schedule things right. So that'd probably be the easiest way. But I'm really, really transparent and I am really easy to get a hold of. So I think just whatever, go on my website. That's probably the easiest way. And if you guys have Instagram, that's probably the best way to just keep an eye on the current stuff.
Very cool, man. Yeah, this knife, like you said, the whole time while we're talking, I'm just sitting here playing with it because it just feels so good in your hands, right?
Yeah.
So I tell you, if you want a knife and you want to get into it, I've never gotten into knives because I know what happens to me as soon as I get into something. I want the best.
Slippery slope.
Yeah, but honestly, I can tell you, man, like I don't need anything better than this. I mean, this thing is awesome. I love the way it feels. You know, I've cut my steak with it. I've cleaned my fingernails with it. I've opened Amazon boxes with it. Like this thing is, you know, this may gut a deer this year.
Hell yeah!
If I'm
Send me
lucky.
pictures of that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely will. So we appreciate you coming on. And
Thank
man,
you
I
guys.
absolutely love your knife. And like I said, you're going to be making me another one here really soon. So appreciate your time.
Sweet. Well, let's all stay in touch. I think the more we have conversations and the more we like decide to, you know, help each other's industries and stuff, we'll all have a better time at it, you know. But I'm super stoked for being on here, guys. I appreciate it. Coolest thing I've done on a Monday after or night in a long time. So, but I want to thank you guys for for bringing me on here. But thank you guys for providing something to the community that is, I think it's really invaluable right now. Like all the different stuff you guys do, and you know, keep doing it the cool way that you're doing it because I think that's about. I would say that's 100% of why you guys keep doing it is because you're doing it the way you do. So please keep being you. Be nice, gentlemen. I love it. It's good stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Like Andy said. What was that, Andy?
I said, don't tell too many people we're nice now.
Yeah,
I know.
Got an image to uphold.
Yeah. Got a grumpy old guy thing to go on. Yeah. It's all right. Me too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners, thank you for jumping on with us this evening. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. We'll see y'all next week. Stay safe.